ELI5. Why do home prices increase over time? Everyone's commenting on land being limited in areas that have seen large population growth, with little supply growth to match. That's true, but people are missing the other aspect. Building densely is prohibited in many of these areas so the supply can meet the demand. See Denver and San Francisco for great examples. Both have seen large population increases over the past few decades, largely from high-income earners who can afford to pay a premium for less housing. Both have zoning codes that guarantee that medium and high-density housing is practically illegal to build. But not by it just sitting there. If it's just sitting there while the population goes from 250m to 350m, then it's still more valuable at the end because there's an increasing number of potential buyers. And they're all highly motivated to buy because people need to live somewhere. It's not like most things where if the price seems too high people can just wait for it to come down. A home in a city where 2 million people need homes is more valuable than that same home when the city needed to house 1m. It's a supply and demand thing. People who own homes like making money, so they bribe politicians to make homes more expensive. That way they can get more money when they sell. Politicians also own lots of homes because they are rich because of bribes, so they also want to make homes more expensive. So they write laws that make homes more expensive. For example, they say you're not allowed to build a new home unless you destroy one, and they make sleeping under bridges illegal. So homes become more expensive and people who don't own homes are sad. Housing prices don't always increase over time. It depends on many factors including population growth, the structure and health of the financial industry and the general economy, zoning and building restrictions, government policies regarding land use and sale, and cultural attitudes toward home ownership, home size, and acceptable debt levels. During my PhD research I found reference to a study that showed that, over long periods of time, housing prices are actually stable and match inflation. Short-term ownership can drive it a bit too. The seller's paying 6 of the sale price in realtor fees, plus taxes and stuff that gets to 8 or 9 total. So if inflation is on target for 2 years and someone sells after less than 5, they're still going to try to sell for 10 more than they pay to be whole. Once that sells, even if I've been in my house that's comparable for longer, I will sell for that price too since that's the market rate. That then snowballs on each successive sale. Something that's only keeping up with inflation doesn't make sense to me as an investment. That's because the house you live in is not an investment. Any investor will tell you that. If you lose your job, how much is that house going to pay your bills? At best most of the time, a personal house is a savings account. Obviously inflation, supply-demand, upgrades make a big difference. Even when looking at remodeling new roof deck, you won't get the full amount back when you go to sell. Few reasons. 1. Limited land near metropolis cause for increase in property prices near where people want to live. Look at suburbs near NYC versus suburbs in the PA. 2. Inflation. Over time the value of things goes up, this includes homes. 3. Newer homes are generally larger than older homes. 4. Homes now have more amenities which cost money. Back in the 80s a dishwasher, HVAC, broadband, etc. weren't a thing. Now everyone expects these in a home when buying. It's supply and demand. Because old people are in power in almost all Western countries, and manage to limit house building. The exact way they did it varies from country to country, but old people want houses as expensive as possible, because this way they can leech money from younger generations. It is purely a generational conflict. In some places there's additional factors like high immigration, but it wouldn't matter if people were allowed to build on their land. Land value increases from everyone else doing things, which is why it is often the center of critique and policy. Is a downtown built up with nicer stores? Nearby land value went up. People had more kids, meaning more humans hoping to be homeowners. Land value went up. More employment opportunities nearby. Land value went up. BlackRock consolidated ownership over a bunch of single-family homes and raised rents for entire towns. That's value went up. The population is growing. There are more people that are wanting homes because of this. When there are more people wanting homes, but not as many new homes popping up, the value of homes increases. You can probably buy a cheap home in a low population area still, but any city with a large metro population has nowhere to build more homes, but the desire to live there is of course growing with the population. So those housing prices go up a lot. Almost cost disease. Simply put, when everything else gets cheaper, the few things which don't get cheaper rise in price to absorb a greater share of everyone's disposable income. You see this effect most strongly expressed in goods and services with inelastic demand, which are resistant to technological innovations which would make them less expensive: housing, healthcare, and education. Housing is an area where there is very little arbitrage. If cars are selling for a low price one place, you can buy it there and drive it to where prices are high. That is not true for housing. It used to be that developers could buy up large swaths of land near a city people wanted to live and build thousands of houses. That was made illegal in most places, so supply can't keep up with demand. We don't build enough housing to meet the demand due to population growth and do not allow for more dense housing development. In theory, as places got more populated, we would start replacing low-density single-family homes with more dense housing such as row homes, duplex, triplex, sixplex, condos, etc. But most American cities do not allow for these sorts of development in residential areas. Good property is property that is scarce and can't be created, manufactured, printed. Gold or housing are good examples. Industry creates more of both, but they are very difficult to create more of. We measure the value in dollars, which historically get less valuable over time because they are constantly being digitally created by central banks and aren't backed by anything. Housing prices in good neighborhoods go up because as the neighborhood gets nicer, new stores, neighborhood improvements like new parks, etc., and more people want to live there. But they can't because other people are already living there. So if you really want to live there, then you have to offer more in rent purchase than other people who also want to live there. A lot of it has to do with interest rates. If rates drop, home prices increase since people can afford a more expensive property. During COVID, the Fed lowered the rate to 0, so a buyer could get rates of 2. So the market responded and house prices went through the roof. Of course there were other factors, such as people fleeing cities for the suburbs as well. Supply and demand. As long as we continue to make new houses at a lesser rate versus the number of homes demolished and number of homes that the greater population would like, prices will rise. We've been at a deficit basically since 2008. I think we are something absurd like 5-10 million extra homes that would need to be created to solve the imbalance right now. Supply and demand. Governments in the West are importing more and more immigrants and not increasing the housing supply to keep pace with it. This causes upward pressure on houses. Added to that, price increases are greatest in desirable areas for the same reason. People want to move there, so houses in the area become more expensive. Supply and demand. In addition to supply and demand, more households being formed without an increase in land, you also get the general inflation dynamic. As money supply increases relative to GDP, prices rise. Combine the general price rise with the supply-demand imbalance due to finite land, you get house prices increasing more than general prices. They don't always. Only in metro areas that experience population growth faster than what construction can keep up with. In metro areas that are seeing population declines, you'll see home prices go down. And in metros where construction keeps up with population growth like Houston or Tokyo, home prices tend to stay flat. If you don't build enough housing for an increasing population, then the price of that housing will increase and you will have more homeless people as well, because there is not enough housing to keep up with the amount of people that need housing. In the US at least, we have been underbuilding housing for 50 years. It's been a while, but I once read a European economic article that looked at housing prices for some of the oldest continuously occupied homes in Europe, I think it was the Netherlands. And they found that over time, like 300 to 500 years, individual home valuations flatten out after you consider inflation, because we build houses slower than population growth. Depressed areas which saw a major crash in 2008 were cheap for a good while. But 15 years later all those abandoned homes are uninhabitable due to neglect, so they're out of the housing supply and prices for the surviving structures are up. There has been an ongoing trend over the last couple decades of people moving out of rural areas and into cities. This has caused the price of housing in cities and their surrounding suburbs to shoot up rapidly. This is one of the primary drivers in housing price growth over inflation. Housing is used as a hedge for pensions and investment funds. There is a vested interest in year-on-year gains. If the housing market collapses because it becomes unsustainable, it takes the banking industry with it. Eternal growth is the ideological standard of a cancer cell. Supply and demand govern prices in a free market where either the seller or buyer can decline a deal. When investment firms buy up residential real estate, there's less for people who actually need a home. This drives up pricing as residents compete for limited homes. The price of a house is roughly the cost of the land plus the cost to build a similar house on that spot. In some crowded areas the price of the land just keeps going up and up. The cost to build a new house on the site goes up as labor and materials costs increase. Even if the price of your home does not outpace inflation, it is still a valuable asset. You got to live in all the years that you are paying a mortgage. So imagine paying the same amount in rent, but having nothing after 30 years. I'd rather have something. Supply and demand. The amount of land in any given area is fixed. As populations grow, so does the number of people who want to live in a given neighborhood or in a given area. Economics 101. When supply is static and demand is increasing, prices will go up. Californian area, 1850 164,000 square miles. California population, 1850 100,000. Californian area, 2023 164,000 square miles. Californian population, 2023 39 million. Same amount of land, 390x the number of people. Supply and demand. All else being equal, the house price is a factor of rent mortgage payments. As inflation goes up, so does the average income and with the amount of rent mortgage payments. The house prices adjust accordingly. Lack of housing inventory, equals home price increases. You can make more houses. Places that have higher density populations. NYC, LA, Mumbai. You can't create new land to build new homes on. You can't make more land, so the land that the house sits on becomes worth more and more over time. The house sitting on the land is less important, but it kinda comes with the land.